when you know who you are and you know what you stand for, you're in a better position to speak your truth to others from this position of love and kindness. I'm more inclined to lie to you if I don't care about you. If I'm harboring love in my heart for you as a human being, I don't have to even like you. Seriously. But if I have love for you as a human being, I'm going to tell you my truth because I think that is the most advantageous for both of us. That's the kindest thing I can do. It might not sound nice, but it will be kind. Hi, I'm Jenny Clark, a conscious leadership expert who spent 2 decades in executive recruiting and talent management. Having worked with giants like Google, Spencer Stuart, I discovered that the secret to transformative leadership lies in the 5 dimensions of conscious leadership. And I'm here to help you unlock your full potential. Join me on this channel as we embark on an honest and vulnerable journey together to become the kind of leader that genuinely inspires organizational transformation. Welcome, first of all.
Yeah.
Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
And why don't you just sort of tell us about yourself and give us a sense for sort of your leadership journey? How did you get to this place? And how do you want to continue to elevate yourself on your path to conscious leadership?
Thank you. Yes, I'll keep it short and sweet and just keep to the highlights. I have the pleasure and the honor to be a public servant. So I'm a senior executive in the federal government, and I have the privilege to work on equity and inclusion for a federal agency. And, getting to this path and into this role that I am in today, it hasn't been easy, but it's definitely been rewarding. I have a background in economic policy and in tax policy, and I have over a decade of experience doing explicitly diversity, equity, inclusion work. And I just know that all of this, passion and enthusiasm of doing this work comes from me having the belief that everyone, no matter your race, gender, income, or the zip code that you were born in or grew up in, deserves better, right? And I come to that because I grew up in a household with 6 women. So my grandmother, my mother, and also my 4 older siblings, who were also my sisters, they taught me this idea of just approaching life with love and care and resilience. And those skill sets and characteristics have really, you know, one challenged me, but created the person that I am today and the leadership style that I have. So when I walk into the door, when I walk into the office, I think, yeah, my equity work or my inclusion work helps me put on that empathetic hat, but it's the generosity that I learned from these women. And whether that's grace, patience, kindness, that also helps me lean into my leadership. And I'm really excited to talk to you, to get advice, and to learn how to be that better leader that I'm hoping to be.
Wow. Well, I have to tell you, it's pretty impressive because you've been in the workforce for a while and you know that I'm going to go so far as to say most environments, workplace environments, aren't necessarily anchored. I should put it differently. Few workplace environments are anchored around love and generosity and kindness. It's unfortunate, but I think we're at a stage where that's what's called for. So
Mhm.
I'm thrilled to hear that that's a commitment that you have that you were brought up with, not one that you need to cultivate necessarily. But maybe you could maybe give me a couple of ideas and challenges that you've had in creating a balance for yourself in environments where some of your approaches weren't always welcome.
Absolutely. I think when you are doing this work and you are working across lines of difference, whether that's age, gender, sometimes people think you're trying to get them because you're being kind. It's like, oh, why is this person being so nice to me? They're going to use me in the long run. Or why is this person taking the extra effort to get to know me as an individual? Do they want something from me? And so some
Mhm.
specific examples are, when I tell people genuinely, "Oh, let's go out to coffee. I'd like to get to know you." And they might not be the same gender as me or race. Maybe we have a 40-year age gap in between us. And that is something that, you just don't see a lot. And you're right. A lot of organizations have a hard time to center love and kindness in a business model that thinks about the bottom line. Or in our case, and in my work now, thinking about serving the public. But I think the best way to serve the public is through love and through kindness. It's almost mission driven to be a public servant. Another example is, you know, I remember growing up, speaking of those women, where sometimes they'd be sick and we would have to be caregivers, my siblings and I, at a very young age. And so when someone walks into my office or sends me an email to say, "Hey, I have to take care of my mom," or "I have to take care of my kids," I'm saying, "Do what you need to do." And it's astounding. It's almost taboo. But that's a challenge because people might consider, well, this person is slacking, and you're enabling a slacker because they want to take time to, do childcare or to be a caregiver to their parents. And so that's been a challenge because, I am held accountable as a leader to make sure that things are getting done, and also trying to honor myself in that process too.
Yeah. So how do you prevent being taken advantage of? Because not everybody's honest about, when they're saying, I need this time to take care of my mom, they could be off having a little vacation.
That's true. That's true. I have two answers to that. I think one is more controversial than the other. So the controversial response is that's their karma.
Okay.
And I know that like maybe you can help me work through that, but I genuinely believe that, when you are intuitive, you can pick up and have discernment on when that happens through time. The second response to that is, how are you not being taken advantage of? Is it goes back to the idea of building that relationship with someone. And when you build trust with them, I have noticed in my personal experience, people are honest. In fact, more honest because you've built that relationship and trust with them.
Yeah. Trust to me is one of the cornerstones of great leadership. I often talk about my father and how he was such a great leader, and he built trust in order to, it wasn't the objective. I mean, trust is something that there's honor in it, right? There's integrity in building trust. You don't do it for a reason per se, but it's part of, as a leader, you need a level of trust to come from, it's got to be mutual so that
Mhm.
you all can agree as to what's necessary and hopefully agree on what the objectives are that you can move forward with. So the fact that you can trust some of these folks, and you use the key word here, that your intuition, yes, I think that's the word I heard you use. So you
Yes.
are intuitive. Very often that goes along with being an empath, someone who is empathetic, but feels deeply and senses truth, right?
Mhm.
You can tell when somebody's maybe not being forthcoming with you. Is that a fair statement in how you're managing some of this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, that's something I encourage a lot of people that I mentor or even just colleagues, tap into your own present self and see what comes up for you. And then you can be that empathic person that you want to be, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. That's how I define empath or being empathic is, are you willing, able, and can you put yourself in someone else's shoes, even for a a second, to see where they're coming from and what their perspective is.
Mhm. And discern in so doing the extent to which that individual is honest, forthcoming, maybe
Mhm.
what some of their intentions are. because what you hear isn't necessarily always what is,
Absolutely.
right?
I've been
Back to
screwed
this whole
over.
idea of, yeah, this whole idea of not being taken advantage of. And I love the idea about karma. Right? It's like they got to live with their lies at some point. It all comes back to home to roost. Um, but yeah, I think that would be, I'd love to hear more about how well that's worked for you as a leader, and maybe a couple of examples of when it hasn't.
Yes. So I had this one person that I was working with, and they they just kept being so tired at work. And they kept calling in and they kept calling in. And I did something that I hardly ever do, rarely do, Jenny, which is I gave them my personal cell phone. Dun dun dun. Like, you don't do that, right? That is like cardinal rule for me. And I just told them, I said, I'm really concerned, but I want to share something with you that I don't think is appropriate to share on our work devices. I'm going to give you my personal cell. And I said in the text message, I'm concerned this job is making you sick.
Mm,
Months, not even 2 months later, I think a month later, this person was diagnosed with a terminal illness. Luckily, they're recovering. And so it had to be a good, this person wasn't showing up on time. They were taking days off randomly and with no explanation because they didn't have one
mm,
themselves. And that
mm,
was really hard for me to make that choice point to say, I'm going to lean into curiosity, figure out what's really going on, and trust that they can take care of themselves and that they are being honest. And so in that case, I'm glad I did that because what if I berated them, told them
yeah.
that they were letting their team down, and then find out literally a month later, by no fault of their own, they were feeling that way. So yeah, that certainly felt like a confirmation. On the flip side of things, I've had colleagues who have become envious at times. And their
Envious.
insecurity, yeah, and their insecurities had an impact on our relationship and our work.
Mm,
And so you're thinking, oh, maybe they're just having a bad day, or maybe they're upset because when you do your best, people notice, and they're noticing that they're not getting that attention that they want for
mhm,
themselves.
mhm,
And so in that moment, I didn't realize that all this extra work that this person was basically leaving for me to have, or these moments where they wouldn't intentionally invite me to meetings that I should be a part of,
mhm,
and then say, oh, sorry about that. Didn't mean to leave you off that email thread and chain. Um, the empath in me wanted to think about my own insecurities and think about why would they act that way, but that is
yeah.
still not my position to give an excuse to their insecurities and undermine our work, my work, and the relationship that we were trying to build together. So that's a
Mhm,
specific example of that didn't go well.
yeah.
But I still understood at the root what was happening.
And how did you manage that so that you could move forward and continue to get work done efficiently and effectively?
Oh boy. Well,
Or is it
I'm
still going on?
no, it's not, because I did two things actually. The first is I became an example of what I think this person should have been to me as far as being a team player. So I would overtly
Mm,
send them, all the calendar holds, even if I didn't know whether or not they were most appropriate, just so that they could know we're a team and
yeah.
make sure they were CC'd on communications. But the second thing is empaths are not pushovers either. And I learned that from my
Mhm,
parents. And all these women, you can't push over your grandma. no matter how much she love you.
That's
And
right.
in this case, I called it out. I said, I
Great.
notice I have not been attending certain meetings that I thought we agreed I should be a part of. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that's happening?
Yeah.
And I just,
And that's so for some people that's confrontational and people avoid that, right? But it sounds like you were very comfortable addressing it. It wasn't contentious. It was sensitive maybe because this person, you knew what they were trying to do and you didn't know how they might respond, if they were going to respond honestly or if they were going to, try to kind of worm their way around whatever actually happened. So tell us
Yes.
what did happen.
So what happened? They still left me off of meeting emails. And so the next step was I went to our, direct supervisor and I said, didn't say the person's name or anything. I said, you asked me to do this project, but I'm not in the meetings in order to get the project done. Could you help me with that? And so, I was really nervous because I was like, oh no, this is going to make things worse between me and this other colleague's relationship,
Mhm.
because the next day our supervisor sent an email to the entire team, not just our small group, and said, please include Courtney in all meetings. She's invaluable to the work that we're trying to get done. And I was just
To
taken
everyone.
aback by that for sure.
Nice. Yeah. Sometimes you have to escalate. You
Mhm.
do. And you tried the direct approach. You tried to model, and which I'm a big fan of modeling the behavior that you want to see in other people. And I don't care what level they are, peers, subordinates, superiors, but at some point you have to ask for help and say, look, I'm not getting the response that I need to get work done. This isn't personal. This is business. And to the extent that you're impeding progress, I got to ask for help.
And that was so
Yeah.
hard for me. That was so hard for me.
What, asking for help?
Yes. Yes. But I think to your
Why?
point, it was necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. But why is it hard to ask for help? I know a lot of people for whom that's the case.
I think in part because, you want to have it figured out. And when you don't have it figured out, you get nervous. You start thinking about the opposite, right? Like in a way, you're like you're being empathetic in that my boss has a gazillion things to work on. Is this really important? And you have to just remind yourself, you kind of have to be the empathetic leader to yourself, right?
I love
And
that.
remind
Yes, for
yourself it's
sure.
okay to ask for help.
It is okay to ask for help. You're not supposed to know everything. I've said that numerous times. As a leader, it doesn't mean that you know everything, that you have all the answers. It doesn't mean that. It means that you ideally are a little more resourceful than everybody else, right? You know where to go, whether it's data or facts or people, whatever the resources might be, you got to call that in at the appropriate time to keep things moving. And sometimes that means putting your ego aside so that you can move forward. And sometimes it means being uncomfortable and having conversations with people that don't necessarily feel good for them or for you. So, um, let's talk a little bit more about some of the things that we had chatted about around. I think you mentioned a term, toxic positivity. Explain what that is.
Oh, this is gonna ruffle feathers, right? It's this idea, the way I interpret it is that it's this idea where you put on this everything's going to be fine, and you ignore the real
Mhm.
problems because you want to stay positive. And that is something easy folks who identify or consider themselves empaths to do. And I'm trying to figure out, Jenny, this balance of approaching things with love, care, and kindness, but also to your point about ego, understand that sometimes things are not always okay and fine. And approaching that that positive toxicity, um, that fine line between just okay, like everything's gonna be fine to, you know, there's a time to consider what is and what's not. That is something that I struggle with in this work environment that I'm in and that I have for a while. So would love to know how to do better in identifying the positive toxicity for myself and for others who might see my empathetic leadership and think, oh, I need to be more like Courtney, but they might be, practicing something that could be harmful for the culture.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'll be honest. I'll offer what I think is an adjacent term that I've experienced quite a bit of. That I think it goes right along with this, and that's passive aggressive behavior. And I think that's what ends up happening in this with this toxic positivity, right? Oh, everything's fine. Look, isn't this nice? Look where we work, and everybody's so nice. Um, and then you turn around and you're like, wait a minute, I that's not what I'm seeing. That's what's coming out of your mouth, but that's not the behavior that I'm witnessing.
Mhm.
So to me, because my I'm kind of simplistic in my approach. Um, and you don't have to be heavy-handed, but I do think there's an element of truth, an
Mhm.
element. How about the truth? Your truth. How about we start there as opposed to telling people what they want to hear. And very often we have been taught to be nice and tell people what we think they want to hear. That to me builds toxicity, both in your body, because you're not being honest to yourself and your body knows the truth, right? And for the rest of the situation, you're creating a culture, a series of people who are it's being modeled that we're just going to keep smiling even if things are painful and unpleasant because we don't deal with truth. And so I think if we individually begin or continue for those of us who are oriented that way to honor and speak our truth, right? I have the 5 dimensions of conscious leadership. The first one is know yourself, and the second one is speak your truth. There's a reason that they're in that order. When you know who you are and you know what you stand for, you're in a better position to speak your truth to others from this position of love and kindness. I'm more inclined to lie to you if I don't care about you. If I'm harboring love in my heart for you as a human being, I don't have to even like you. Seriously. But if I have love for you as a human being, I'm going to tell you my truth because I think that is the most advantageous for both of us. That's the kindest thing I can do. It might not sound nice, but it will be kind. That's how I see it. And it's very hard for people to do if they were raised with this whole idea of everything is be nice, right? Especially as women. That's how we
Yes,
were socialized.
yeah. And
Nice is not always kind.
especially I love this last bit that you said about, especially as women, because growing up with Black women, I've seen that being tested over and over again in the household, outside of the household, at work,
Mhm.
in school, you name it. And so you're onto something. And majority, statistically, majority of public servants tend to be Black and brown people. and women, right? And so I think that there's something there that you're really saying that's true.
Yeah. I think we are, I sort of say predisposed. There's a part of me that there's a conflict, there's an inner conflict that I think you're pointing out. On the one hand, we were raised for some cultures in the church, um, to be honest, to tell the truth, all these things. And at the same time, we've had to face inequities, untruths, injustices.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you manage that, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the name of creating a culture that is in service to all. And I happen to believe that that is indeed possible, but the truth telling has to be modeled by some of the most senior people. And to the extent more senior people are not speaking truth, then I believe everybody else needs to begin to take issue with that. We're not, the rank and file, this notion of level, I think is kind of antiquated. And I think too many people don't understand the agency that they have in speaking up when they see something wrong. I don't care if you work in the mailroom, if you see something wrong happening, then you deserve and owe it to everyone else to say something. I know that takes a lot of courage for people, but I don't see any other way that we're going to begin to change some of these organizations. We have to start getting comfortable in our own skin and know that what we are doing is not just for our own personal benefit, but for the benefit of the rest of the organization of which we're a part. I don't know how that sits with you, how realistic that might feel.
You know, or some organizations, including mine, who's been around for nearly a century, it's it's what you're saying is a lot. What you're saying is a lot, and I think uh, the language around trust and honesty is more on the newer side, if we're being on
Mhm.
honest with ourselves. And I'm sitting with that because I'm trying to envision a workplace or organization even beyond the scope of where I am currently, where people feel like they have that agency. And I'm also thinking about how, as a leader, I'm empowering people to have that agency if they feel like they don't have it now. And I would love to know what you thought about that.
Um, I love that you're bringing this up because so many organizations all around the world, forget about just the United States, are old, ancient in some cases. I mean, and therefore entrenched. It's like, well, it's been around this long, it's going to
Yep.
be the same. No, I don't necessarily buy that, first of all. I think we're in a new age. I think we are part of the change, and we need to know in ourselves and begin to have the confidence and the conviction and the desire to create something new that is in service to all. And I keep saying that because I feel as though so many things, well, it's not my problem. This is, hey, I'm going to get mine and then I'm out. Good luck with the rest of it. And that is not serving us. That mindset of, I got mine is not good enough anymore. I just think I won't get too much on my high horse, but I feel very strongly that there's a big shift in our civilization coming that is calling for us to be more of our core of who we came here to be, and really honor that because there are solutions that work for all. So many of us have been working in organizations that serve only a few. If you're a public servant, you're used to serving the masses. For-profit environments have a different mindset, right? Um, and unfortunately, we have a lot of people in leadership roles who don't necessarily understand and appreciate who it is that they're serving. Leaders, this whole idea of a servant leader, of a compassionate, generous leader, as a leader, I knew I was there for my teams. And so are you. This isn't about me. This is about me being the best I can be in service to the team to get done what we've agreed to get done. So I think it's time we shift and reorient ourselves to that mindset. So I don't know how, again, I punt back to you because being in an organization that's 100 years old, it might sound like pie in the sky. But I mean, can you think of little things that you could do that could create change over time?
Yes. I certainly think that you don't, you're not a public servant or you're not a nonprofit, or even if you are in for profit, but the work that you do, you're not in those positions because you don't care, right? Oftentimes people do care. And so I think it's throwing the question that you threw to me back out into those organizations and to those individuals and ask them, do you know who you are? And is trust and honesty a value for you? Is that something you can embody? And I think when we have those very tough and hard conversations come to the surface, maybe that is the start of changing old institutions. Maybe language hardened structures, but cultures can make them better, right? And, the language is like, okay, we don't do this. We've done this before, and or this is we're going to keep to the status quo. But it's really asking ourselves, do we value truth and honesty and trust? Um, and maybe that is a start. I don't know.
I think it is. Personally, I do. I think there's a little pre-work in that, though. There's a condition. All right. And it's that you do the work for yourself. You can't just put it out there as a platitude and not show up having examined your own behaviors to understand that it's a shift in mindset. And fortunately, as a gracious, empathic person, you will initially show some grace to those who might be struggling with it because they didn't grow up in trusting, generous, loving households, and it's a foreign concept. But what's to say that what you can help be a part of constructing wouldn't be that? Imagine that the workplace could become a place where you actually feel good about yourself, where you trust the people that you work side by side with. Imagine that, right? Where you don't tolerate negative commentary and gossip and things that undermine um, a positive, healthy culture. And I think I'm always, when I give speeches, I often cite the 5 reasons why people quit. It's one of there are many, but a recent McKinsey study identified 5. And one of the main ones, the number one, was a lack of career development and advancement. And I think number 3 is uncaring and uninspiring leaders.
Mm,
And that saddens me to no end. But I think it's because these individuals haven't been held accountable. They weren't assessed and expected to care. No one said it, right? They're not being evaluated based on that and incentivized to behave in that way. That's an easy fix. In the meantime, show up that way and let you be the one showing up that way to get the bigger bonus because your team performed better because you created this whole culture for them in which to perform. And I think we don't think about all of the systems that need to be in place and honored to support the delivery of great leadership and great work product.
and thinking about this idea of, you know, leadership and that culture of advisement, uh, it is not ingrained to have the things that we've been discussing today, right? Kindness,
Mhm,
trust,
mhm.
caring, and uh, I'm sure people have many degrees and they have many years of experience, and then they're called upon to be a leader, and you know it looks different, and it looks different, I think, in part because of the caring piece. Mhm.
Yeah. And that's why I say the work that we each have to do before we can show up in earnest, because people feel you. They feel your energy as much as they hear what you say. So you can say all the right things, but if you're not actually showing up,
Mhm.
then you'll have no credibility. But the work is, have you looked in the mirror to see who you are? Can you honestly say that you operate with a level of integrity? Are you telling yourself the truth
Mhm.
about who you are, how you work, how you treat other people? It
Mhm.
starts there. Because when you can say, you can look in the mirror and say, yeah, I am. And you know what? I'm not doing that thing that I tend to do anymore. I'm not. I don't need anybody else to tell me, right? I'll feel better about who I am if I behave this way.
Mhm.
And frankly, I don't even care how people respond to it, if people respond negatively to it, because I'm pushing love out there. And I have to understand that people's responses are a reflection of them and not me,
Mhm.
right? So if someone's like, "Oh, well, you," okay, that's you. That's you. Okay.
I imagine so many people who aren't having this conversation right now who identify as an empath, someone who puts themselves in other people's shoes, but don't feel worthy enough to do that for themselves. Yeah.
That's such a great point. And I equate worthiness with self-love.
Mm.
And empaths can be at risk of putting others first because I feel you so deeply. Let me help you. But my ability to help you is limited by my ability to help myself first, right? I can't offer you an empty cup. So that's why I I come first. I don't know if you have children, but I have a son who's now grown, but as a single mom, I realized, sort of at the one of the approaching the pinnacle of my career, I was very demanding. I needed to be there for him first, actually second. I needed to be there for me. I needed to take care of myself so that I could be there for him. He came first after me, and then my work. And I think we're not oriented that way, especially as women. Back to that, where we tend to be like, well, I have to, I just power through and do it. And you're grinding yourself into the ground with nothing left.
Mhm.
So it makes no sense.
Yeah.
But it's a retraining once you begin to understand how worthy you truly are.
Remind me as I'm on my own journey when it's okay
Mhm.
to walk away, when your generosity and your love and your kindness is there and you can leave it there and
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Um, that's such a good question. And I've been there. I felt very conflicted before. And very often it comes out of a sense of frustration that you are one of the few who has this orientation and you're trying to climb a hill that feels quite steep. It's such a personal decision. I mean, it comes down to having that conversation with yourself. Can I affect change? Can I make this someplace where I can continue to grow and continue to have impact in a way that positively serves others? And if your answers to that are no, seems to me it's time to go, right? Without pinpointing any individual, because I'm not going to give any individual but so much power,
Right.
right, over me. Because power is, it's given, right? I'm not giving away my power by saying, well, they're in this role and they own it. No, I'm going to decide. I have more power than I realize. Most of us do. And I have to set boundaries to protect myself and my well-being. So I think it's a series of these questions that you have to pose to yourself. Sit quietly, talk to someone you trust. And sometimes I had someone tell me once, I said, you know what, I'm done. I was in this one job. I said, I can't do this anymore. And they said, you know what? Happen to be a very spiritual person. They said, I think you're here for a reason. They were right. I stayed. I stayed for another year because I saw it when it was offered to me. I could see the reason and I could buy into that, and it served me well and it served my team well. So sometimes you need someone who can offer another perspective to help you realize what else might be at play. What lesson might you need to learn?
Thank you. Thank you for today. It's been awesome.
Courtney, thank you. What a pleasure. What an honor. So grateful for you and so proud of you for the journey that you have chosen to be on. And stay with it. Beautiful soul that you are. Stay with it. Stay loving, stay empathetic, stay generous and kind and powerful.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been an honor.
Take care, my dear. See you soon.